Alright, just a little quick update. Not on the truck or anything, but on the Cutlass. I recently noticed, so this gasket right here has been giving me problems between the throttle body and the air horn assembly of the carb, or the Venturi, not the air horn. And what's happening is it's leaking fuel out the sides. Right there you can see it's damp. And right there you can see it's damp. It's been doing it ever since I put it on. And I finally noticed it was starting to get a little worse. It's like, alright, well, let's fix it now. Story behind this is up to Cutlass. It's a Rochester 2GC. It's a low compression 350 V8 making 250 horsepower at 9:1 compression, which still is not unreasonably low. I do want to keep this 2-barrel on here, so eventually when we rebuild that motor, I plan on putting in the high compression pistons to get it up to 10 1/4. The factory high compression pistons that would come in the 4-barrel engine, but we're going to keep this 2-barrel, so maybe get it up to 290 horse, 300 horse. We'll see. And then we'll do some head work too. I'd like to keep the factory cam if I can, like the cam that's in it, and the lifters and the rockers and everything. Maybe replace the push rods, which means we'll replace the rockers, but I'd like to keep the original cam because it's the original cam. But this carburetor I rebuilt. I had the car for 2 years. I didn't really drive it much, and then 2 years into owning it, I really got into the car. So what happened was, this is one of the first things I did, was I rebuilt this carburetor. And I'd rebuilt simple carburetors before, simple 1-barrels and all that for motorcycles and stuff, but this was the first automotive carburetor I ever touched. If you want to get into the basics of rebuilding carburetors, this is really a great one to learn on. But there are some weird things with it. The Rochesters, some of them came with emulsion tubes, some of them didn't. They change a little bit here and there. This one actually has a very unique thing inside the float bowl, which we're not going to show you today. There's a shield around the pivot point of the float. I haven't seen it on any other thing. It stands with the GM part number and everything. I haven't found any documentation on what the part number is. Not in my Oldsmobile manual, although I haven't looked that hard. It's just one of those things that make this carburetor specific to the car. Nice recent invention was the adjustable choke. A lot of cars had stove chokes before this, but into the 70s, as they were getting more emissions conscious, you got an adjustable choke, which is perfect. Really, really good for the car. This is also kind of a complicated 2-barrel. Not really complicated, but it's like working on a clock. All these rods have to be bent to a specific spec, which is specified inside my shop manual. So we have 4 linkages that we have to bend and get perfect. One for the accelerator pump, high idle cam, the choke, and then the vacuum pull off of the choke. And it's kind of cool the way they did emissions back in the day. This also has a transmission control solenoid, so the vacuum advance does not go right to the carburetor. It goes right there, goes to a solenoid, which is controlled by a switch with a resistor, and then it goes to, there's a switch on the transmission that goes and operates, tells the switch when to engage, and then that will pull the vacuum. That it's also hooked up to the manifold, the carburetor, and then the long line goes out to the distributor. So interesting early emissions, and the purpose of that was to reduce nitroses of oxide. It would retard the timing to cool down the combustion chamber and get rid of those NOx's, because those are the most dangerous. Ozone, those are the emissions that actually deplete the ozone, so that's what they were trying to get away with. But retarding the timing, you get more hydrocarbons, which aren't as bad, but they're still bad. So just interesting stuff. But the one problem, the only thing we're fixing today is we're going to take the throttle body off from the Venturi assembly, and we are going to make this gasket from scratch if we can. It's pretty thick. I might not be able to, but it's pretty hard. I'll see what I have in my carburetor servicing box. But that's all we're doing today, so I'll update you as we go. So I actually have another one. This is the old one. Taking it off. It's definitely used. We can't reuse it even if we wanted to. I cleaned up this sealing surface. Got to clean up the sealing surface underneath. But this is the new one. Forgot I had an extra rebuild kit lying around. So you have another carburetor to the intake manifold gasket, which is perfect. But we're going to replace this, and we're going to put a little fuel resistant RTV. I've got this specialized stuff. Oh, where'd I put that bottle? No, not in there. It's in my box of carburetor magic. There it is. So we have gasket dressing and sealant, which is interesting stuff. But then we have this. This is the good stuff. This is our fuel-resistant gasket maker. And what is this? High-temperature thread seal. Another good thing to have. And some fuel system O-rings and stuff like that, just in case. You never know what you're gonna work on. Yeah. So we don't have to make one. We're just gonna use this old one, slap it on, seal it up, let it sit for a little bit, and then we'll fire it up and see what happens. So it still leaks a little bit, only when it's off though, and I pump it a bunch, it leaks. It's just the design of that carburetor. There's no screws on the outside to hold it tight, and also it's 51 years old, so it's probably a little warped. If I wanted to take the time, my machinist straight edges at work, I could check the straightness of both surfaces and see if it's warped at all. But who knows? It's probably just the way it's gonna be. It's not leaking out of the throttle shafts though, which is really nice. Now there's just one more complaint I have about the car with the throttle. At the very beginning, as soon as I push down, there's a little bit of resistance, like it's hitting a detent or something, even though it's not. But once I'm past that, this is all smooth. It's just right off the beginning, it's a little rough. So it could be just the cable worn or whatever. And another thing is the RPMs. It's idling a little high. Looks like 850 RPM. So I might have a little bit of a vacuum leak. But when we go down into gear, it kicks it down and we go to about 600. It should be about 100 RPMs lower in both ranges. So now let's just go out and take a peek. See if lowering it, the idle screw, does anything. There's some pretty big holes in the throttle blades. That squeaking is my alternator. It needs a new bearing. Let's see if we can't stick our hand under here. Yeah, that screw isn't even touching the carburetor body now. We're idling about 100 RPMs lower. Really not that lower though. Yeah, a little bit lower. And not maybe a 50 RPM difference. Yeah, I'll try and figure it out. Okay, it's idling much better. We are sitting right around focus camera. That says 600, 650. I'd say we're about 700 RPM, 650, 700. And when we put it down and drive, oh yeah, it's right where we want to be. Problem, I had two vacuum lines with blocked. Come back here. This right here is for the vacuum pull off. That goes down to the base of the carburetor. This right here runs to the transmission shift control solenoid. And what we had is we had this line, the vacuum pull-off, running all the way up here, and this one running down there. But hooked up properly now. Shouldn't have any problems. Sounds good.